What happens when Hollywood's smoothest gentleman walks onto a stage known for polite smiles? But razor-sharp words hide just beneath the surface. The lights above the View studio glow warmer than usual that morning, casting a soft, almost deceptive calm across the round table. The audience claps on cue, cheerful and unsuspecting, unaware that within minutes, that applause will curdle into stunned silence. George Clooney steps out from behind the curtain with his familiar half-smile, the one that has charmed red carpets, press rooms, and decades of fans. He raises a hand in greeting, modest, composed, every inch the seasoned star. But there's something else in his eyes today. Not anger, not arrogance, caution. Before we go any further, if you love uncovering the real drama behind celebrity moments, make sure to subscribe to Stage View right now and like and comment so you never miss stories that explode beyond the headlines. Joy Behar watches him approach, lips curved upward, posture relaxed, but her gaze never leaves him. She's been doing this too long to be fooled by surface pleasantries. Joy has sharpened her instincts on politicians, actors, and cultural icons alike. She knows when a guest is here to promote, and when they're here to defend. As George takes his seat, there's a brief exchange of nods, friendly enough for the cameras, but beneath the table, both of them are bracing. The host introduces him with practiced enthusiasm. Awards, legacy, activism. The audience cheers louder at the mention of his humanitarian work. George nods appreciatively, folds his hands together, and exhales slowly. He came prepared to talk about a film. He did not come prepared for a cross-examination disguised as conversation. Joy leans forward first. "So, George," she says lightly, her voice playful but precise, "you've always been very vocal about politics. Do you think celebrities like yourself actually help the conversation, or sometimes make it worse?" A polite question, a loaded one. George chuckles softly, the sound smooth, rehearsed. "Well, I think people should speak about what they care about. I don't think having a platform means you should be silent." The audience murmurs approval. A safe answer. Too safe. Joy smiles wider, tilting her head. "Sure, but when you speak, millions listen. Doesn't that come with responsibility? Especially when not everyone agrees with your perspectives." The word perspectives lands heavier than it should. George shifts in his chair, crossing one leg over the other. Inside, a flicker of irritation sparks, quick, controlled. He's been asked this question 1,000 times, but rarely with this tone. Not accusatory. Curious. Surgical. "I think responsibility," he replies, "is about being honest. I've never claimed to have all the answers." Joy raises an eyebrow. The audience senses it, something tightening in the air. "But you do claim to know better than a lot of people," she says, laughing lightly as if to soften the blow. "You've criticized voters, leaders, even entire regions of the country. Some people would say that's a little condescending." There it is. The clapping stops. A cough echoes from somewhere in the audience. George's smile fades just a fraction. Not enough for a headline, but enough for anyone watching closely to feel the shift. "I don't think pointing out injustice is condescension," he says carefully. "I think ignoring it would be worse." Joy nods, slowly, deliberately. "But who decides what's injustice?" "You." A ripple of tension runs through the studio like electricity under the floor. George inhales, deep and steady. He reminds himself where he is. Live television. Millions watching. One wrong word and tomorrow's narrative writes itself. "I decide for myself," he answers. "Just like everyone else does." Joy leans back, folding her arms. "Except not everyone has a movie premiere, a press tour, and a microphone every time they decide something." A few gasps slip out. The audience doesn't clap this time. The other hosts exchange glances, sensing the conversation veering off the polite path it was supposed to follow. George turns slightly toward Joy now, no longer addressing the room, but her directly. His voice remains calm, but there's steel underneath. "So what would you prefer?" he asks. "That actors stay quiet? That artists pretend they don't live in the same world as everyone else?" Joy meets his gaze without blinking. "I'd prefer honesty without superiority. And sometimes, George, it sounds like Hollywood talking at people instead of with them." The silence is thick enough to taste. George's jaw tightens. He feels the familiar frustration rise, the sense that no matter how carefully he speaks, he's being cast as the villain in a story he didn't write. He glances briefly toward the audience, searching for reassurance, but finds only uncertainty staring back. "I don't think caring is superiority," he says, slower now. I think dismissing voices because they come from actors is. Joy smiles again, but this time it doesn't reach her eyes. No one's dismissing you, George. We're questioning you. Big difference. A nervous laugh breaks out from somewhere off camera. The moderator tries to interject, but Joy gently waves her hand, never taking her eyes off George. You've criticized talk shows before, Joy continues. You've said media creates division. Yet here you are. Isn't that a little contradictory? George exhales through his nose. This wasn't on the prep sheet. I came here to have a conversation, he says. Not to fight. Joy tilts her head again. Sometimes conversation is a fight. The audience reacts audibly now, half applause, half uneasy murmuring. George leans back, rubbing his thumb against his fingers, a small tell he rarely shows. He realizes something in that moment. This interview isn't about his movie or his activism or even politics. It's about power. Who gets to speak? Who gets challenged? Who gets the last word? And Joy Behar isn't backing down. As the camera pulls in tighter on their faces, capturing every micro-expression, every flicker of restraint, the tension hardens into something undeniable. Polite smiles still exist, but now they're shields. And behind them, sharp words are lining up, waiting to strike. This was only the beginning. The next question is already forming on Joy's lips. And George Clooney is about to realize that staying composed might cost him more than losing his temper ever would. Just as the applause sign flickers uncertainly above the audience, and the producer's voice crackles faintly in the host's earpieces, the calm veneer of daytime television starts to crack. And once it breaks, there's no putting it back together. The applause sign flashes again, this time more insistently, as if it can force the room back into obedience. A few audience members comply, clapping too loudly, too quickly, the sound echoing hollow against the studio walls. George Clooney nods once, acknowledging the noise without accepting its comfort. Joy Behar turns slightly toward the table, adjusts her glasses, and for a fleeting second, the tension seems to ease. But it's only a pause, not a retreat. The moderator clears her throat, eager to redirect. George, your new film explores moral responsibility. Joy cuts in gently, her voice still warm, still smiling. Which is why this is such an interesting conversation. George's eyes flick toward the moderator, then back to Joy. He knows what's happening now. This isn't accidental. This is deliberate steering. He straightens his posture, shoulders squared, expression calm but alert, like a man stepping onto ice he knows might crack. Joy rests her elbows on the table. Your film asks whether individuals should stand up against systems they believe are broken. That's a powerful message. But some people feel you only apply that logic when it aligns with your own beliefs. George lets out a quiet laugh, not amused, not angry. Measured. I think everyone does that to some extent. Joy nods. Fair. But when you do it, it becomes cultural commentary. And when others do it, they're labeled ignorant or dangerous. A murmur ripples through the audience. Someone whispers, "Oh wow." Another shifts uncomfortably in their seat. The camera lingers on George's face, catching the slight tightening around his eyes. I don't label people dangerous for disagreeing with me, George says. I label actions dangerous when they harm others. Joy leans back, folding her hands. And who decides what harm is? That's where people feel talked down to. There it is again. That phrase. Talked down to. George feels it land heavier this time, not because it's new, but because it's sticking. He pauses longer than before, choosing words with surgical care. I grew up in a family that debated everything. Loudly. Disagreement doesn't scare me. What scares me is silence. Joy smiles, a thin line. Silence from whom? From people who could help, George answers. From people who know better. Joy's eyes sharpen. You see? That right there. Know better. That's what people hear as superiority. A beat. The audience is quiet now. No clapping. No murmuring. Just listening. George exhales, his patience thinning, though his tone remains controlled. I'm not claiming moral perfection. I'm saying we all have a responsibility to be informed. Joy tilts her head. And if someone is informed and still disagrees with you, then that's their right, George replies quickly. Joy raises an eyebrow. But do you respect it? The question hangs, suspended, dangerous. George looks at her for a long second. In his mind, he sees headlines forming like storm clouds. Clooney clashes on The View. Actor loses cool. He refuses to give them that satisfaction. Yes, he says finally. I respect disagreement. I don't respect indifference. Joy nods slowly, as if considering this. Then she smiles again, brighter this time, almost conspiratorial. You know, George, I've interviewed a lot of actors who say that. But when the conversation shifts, when the pushback comes, the respect tends to disappear. A few audience members clap. Others stay frozen, unsure which side they're supposed to be on. George's voice tightens just a notch. I'm sitting here, aren't I? Joy laughs softly. You are. And I give you credit for that. The moderator jumps in quickly, sensing the narrowing gap between civility and confrontation. Joy, I think George is trying to say. Joy raises a hand again. Let him speak. He's doing fine. George glances toward the moderator, gratitude flickering briefly, then returns his attention to Joy. I don't mind tough questions, he says. But I think there's a difference between challenging ideas and assigning motives. Joy's smile fades. And you think I'm doing the latter? I think, George says carefully, that you're framing me as someone who looks down on people. And that's not who I am. Joy's eyes lock onto his. Intent doesn't erase impact. The audience reacts audibly now, sharp inhales, scattered applause. A woman in the front row nods emphatically. A man behind her shakes his head. George leans forward for the first time, forearms resting on the table. The posture change is subtle, but it signals something new. Engagement. Resolve. Then let's talk about impact, he says. Because the impact of telling people to stay quiet, to not speak out because they're famous, that matters too. Joy's tone cools. No one told you to stay quiet. Not directly, George replies. But that implication is always there. Joy shrugs. Or maybe people just want celebrities to listen as much as they speak. A pause. George blinks, caught off guard, not by the sharpness, but by the simplicity. He sits back, processing. I do listen, he says. But listening doesn't mean agreeing. Joy nods. Finally, something we agree on. A ripple of laughter breaks through the tension, brief and nervous. For a moment, it seems like the storm might pass. The moderator smiles, relieved, ready to pivot back to safer territory. But Joy isn't done. You've said in interviews, she continues, voice casual, that talk shows like this oversimplify complex issues. Yet here you are, simplifying your critics as indifferent. George's jaw tightens again. That's not what I said. Joy lifts a finger. I watched the interview. The audience murmurs. The moderator shifts in her seat, sensing the ground giving way beneath them. I said, George responds, slower now, that sound bites don't allow for nuance, which is exactly what we're dealing with right now. Joy smiles, sharp. And yet you're still using them. A collective intake of breath. Someone in the audience whispers, oh no. George laughs once, short and humorless. This is starting to feel less like an interview and more like a trial. Joy chuckles. Only if you think questions are accusations. The room feels smaller now. The lights hotter. The air heavier. George feels the familiar pressure behind his temples, the kind that comes when restraint starts to feel like surrender. I don't, he says. But I do think there's a narrative being pushed here. Joy's expression hardens. And there it is. There what is? George asks. The suggestion that media is out to get you, Joy replies. That anyone who challenges you has an agenda. George shakes his head. That's not what I'm saying. But it's what people hear, Joy says softly. The words land with quiet finality. The audience is silent again, hanging on every syllable. George opens his mouth to respond, then stops. He realizes something in that moment. No answer will satisfy everyone. Every word is a risk. Every pause a confession. He chooses honesty. I'm not perfect, he says. I get things wrong. But I won't apologize for caring, and I won't apologize for speaking. Joy studies him, her gaze unreadable. No one asked you to apologize. The moderator finally interjects, voice firm. We need to take a quick break. Relief washes through the room, but it's incomplete. The camera pulls back slightly as the music swells, but the tension doesn't dissipate. George nods once, lips pressed together, eyes distant. Joy adjusts her papers, composed, unbothered. As the audience claps mechanically, unsure what they're applauding anymore, one thing is clear. Whatever this conversation was supposed to be, it has become something else entirely. And when the cameras come back on, the polite smiles may still be there, but the sharp words are no longer hiding. The music fades, the clapping dies down, and the red light on the camera blinks back to life. The break is over. Whatever protection that pause offered evaporates instantly. George Clooney inhales slowly, steadying himself, His expression reset into something neutral, practiced. Joy Behar straightens in her chair, a small sip of water, a composed nod. The audience settles, but the unease lingers like a low hum beneath the seats. The moderator smiles too brightly. Welcome back. George nods politely, eyes forward. Joy glances at him sideways, then back to the camera. Joy begins, voice light again, almost conversational. During the break, I was thinking about something you said. About responsibility. George turns toward her. Okay, you believe people with platforms have a duty to speak, Joy continues. But what about the duty to understand the people who feel dismissed by that speech? George's lips part slightly. He doesn't answer right away. The audience leans in. I try to understand, he says finally. But understanding doesn't mean validating every belief. Joy nods slowly. No, but it does mean not assuming bad faith. George feels a flicker of frustration spark again. I don't assume bad faith. I assume consequences. Joy smiles, but this time there's an edge to it. And some people assume you assume bad faith. A soft ripple of laughter runs through the audience, more nervous than amused. George rubs his hands together once, a subtle gesture, then places them back on the table. Joy, can I ask you something? She tilts her head. Of course. Do you believe celebrities should stay out of political conversations? Joy considers this for a moment, eyes drifting upward. No, she says. I believe they should be prepared to be challenged when they enter them. George nods. Fair. And, Joy adds, turning back to him, I believe some of them confuse being challenged with being attacked. The room tightens again. The moderator shifts, ready to jump in, but George speaks first. I don't feel attacked, he says. I feel boxed in. Joy raises an eyebrow. Boxed in how? Like there's a script, George replies. The activist actor. The out-of-touch elite. No matter what I say, it fits that frame. Joy's smile fades, replaced by something more serious. That frame exists for a reason. A murmur sweeps the audience. Someone claps once, then stops. Because some people abuse their platforms? George asks. Because some people never listen to the fallout of what they say. Joy responds. George leans forward again, his voice lower now, more intimate. I listen to criticism all the time. I just don't let it silence me. Joy meets his gaze. No one's trying to silence you, George. Then why does it always come back to whether I should speak at all? He asks. Joy exhales, a hint of impatience breaking through her composure. Because when you speak, you don't just add to the conversation, you dominate it. The word dominate lands like a slap. The audience reacts immediately, gasps, murmurs, scattered applause. George sits back, visibly taken aback. That's not my intention, he says. Intent, Joy replies calmly, isn't the same as effect. George shakes his head, a small, almost weary motion. So what's the solution? That I pretend I'm not heard? That I dilute what I say so no one feels uncomfortable? Joy studies him for a long second. Maybe the solution is humility. The studio goes quiet. George's jaw tightens. He forces a smile that doesn't quite hold. Humility doesn't mean silence. No, Joy agrees. But it does mean knowing when to step back. The moderator tries again to steer the conversation. George, your film. George lifts a hand gently. Let me answer that. He turns fully toward Joy now, the camera's catching the shift. This isn't a debate anymore. It's personal. I've spent years funding causes, working behind the scenes, not just talking, he says. I don't show up when it's convenient and disappear when it's not. Joy nods. I know that, and I respect it. A brief pause. The tension softens just enough to make the next moment sting more. But, Joy continues, respect doesn't mean immunity. George exhales sharply through his nose. I'm not asking for immunity. Then accept the criticism, Joy says. Without deflecting. George's voice tightens. This isn't criticism. This is a character assessment. Joy leans back, folding her arms again. Sometimes criticism feels like that when it hits close. A low murmur ripples through the audience. The moderator's smile has vanished entirely now. George runs a hand over his face, a rare break in his polished exterior. Do you think I enjoy being criticized? He asks. Do you think I don't question myself? Joy's expression softens, just slightly. Then why does it seem like you're always on defense? George looks down for a moment, then back up. Because the conversation never seems to move forward. It's always about whether I should be here, not what I'm saying. Joy nods slowly. Maybe because people are tired of the messenger. The words hang heavy. George sits very still. Tired of me? He asks quietly. Tired of being talked over. Joy replies just as quietly. The audience is silent now, completely. Even the studio hum seems louder in the absence of reaction. George straightens, his composure returning, but something has changed. There's a hardness now, a line drawn. I won't apologize for using my voice, he says. And I won't pretend that caring deeply is a flaw. Joy meets his gaze, unwavering. And I won't pretend that power doesn't come with blind spots. A beat. Two seasoned figures, neither willing to yield. The moderator finally speaks, her voice tense. We have time for one more question. Joy glances at her, then back at George. Last one. George nods once. Joy leans in slightly. If you could say one thing to the people who feel alienated by celebrities like you, what would it be? The audience leans forward as one. George pauses, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He knows this answer will echo far beyond this studio. I'd say, he begins slowly, that I'm not your enemy. And that disagreement doesn't mean disrespect. Joy listens, expression unreadable. And, George adds, I'd ask them to judge me by my actions, not just my words. A few scattered claps break the silence. Joy nods. Fair enough, she says. But the tension doesn't break. It just settles, heavy and unresolved. As the camera pulls back slightly, capturing the full table again, it's clear this conversation hasn't ended. It's only reached a pause, one that will demand a reckoning. The final seconds tick down, invisible but relentless. The moderator thanks George for being there, her voice careful, diplomatic, as if trying to stitch together something that is already torn. The applause sign lights up again, brighter than before, demanding enthusiasm. This time, the clapping is louder, but fractured. Some hands strike together with conviction. Others hesitate, unsure. A few don't clap at all. George Clooney rises from his chair, smoothing his jacket, the familiar movie star composure back in place like armor snapped shut. He smiles for the camera, courteous, restrained, but his eyes betray the cost of the exchange. Joy Behar stands as well, offering her hand. George takes it. The handshake is firm, brief, and perfectly polite. Two professionals. Two wills. No victory declared. The camera pulls back. The music swells. The red light clicks off. But the moment doesn't end. The audience exhales all at once, voices breaking free as soon as they're allowed. Whispers turn into chatter. That got intense. She didn't let up. He handled it better than I would. Phones are already out. Clips are already being clipped. Someone in the front row is typing furiously, thumbs flying, eyes bright with the thrill of witnessing something that feels bigger than daytime television. Behind the table, George nods goodbye to the hosts, thanks them quietly, and walks off stage. The smile fades the second he passes the curtain. His shoulders drop just slightly, the weight finally allowed to settle. An assistant murmurs something reassuring. George barely hears it. His mind is replaying moments, phrases, pauses, that single word that landed hardest. Dominate. Across the studio, Joy gathers her notes, calm, unshaken. She's been in the fire before. She knows how these moments live longer after the cameras stop rolling. A producer leans in, whispering urgently. Joy nods once. She already knows. This one is going to travel. And it does. Within minutes, clips flood social media. A tight shot of George leaning forward, jaw set. A sharp cut to Joy's raised eyebrow. Captions scream in bold text. George Clooney shut down on The View? Joy Behar takes on Hollywood power. Polite smiles, sharp words. The comments ignite. He was respectful. She was reaching. No, he proved her point. Finally, someone challenged him. This is why celebrities shouldn't lecture people. This is exactly why they should. Hashtags trend. Think pieces appear before lunch. Entertainment blogs dissect body language frame by frame. Political commentators claim the moment for their side. Everyone sees what they want to see. By evening, George's name is everywhere, but not for his film. A reporter corners him outside a restaurant, microphone thrust forward. George, do you regret anything you said on The View today? He pauses, that same careful pause from the table. Cameras flash. No, he says simply. But I respect the conversation. The clip circulates instantly. Some praise the restraint. Others call it deflection. Joy, meanwhile, addresses it on the next episode, calm and unapologetic. We ask questions here, she says. That's the job. Applause follows, stronger, more unified this time. The moment hardens into a cultural Rorschach test. Not about George Clooney. Not about Joy Behar, but about voice, power, and who gets challenged when they speak. Days later, the fire cools, as it always does. Another headline replaces it. Another controversy rises. But the clip remains bookmarked, rewatched, debated late into comment sections and group chats. Because something real happened at that table. Not a shouting match. Not a meltdown. But a collision of certainty and scrutiny. Polite smiles that couldn't soften sharp words. Two people unwilling to back down. Not out of ego, but conviction. And that's why it lingered. Now it's your turn. Did George Clooney stand his ground, or prove Joy Behar's point? Was this necessary confrontation, or unfair pressure? Share your opinion in the comments. Let the conversation continue. And if you want more explosive cinematic stories that go beyond the headlines, subscribe to Stage View right now. This is where the moments don't end when the cameras cut, and where the real drama begins.